They laughed when they stole her future, but none of them noticed the quiet princess building the kingdom they would one day beg to enter. In the kingdom of Willowmere, where pastel blossoms floated through the air like tiny clouds and glowing rivers shimmered beneath crystal bridges, every young cat dreamed of finding their place in the world. Some became inventors, some became healers, some became explorers. Princess Elara dreamed of becoming something much simpler. She wanted her family to love her. Elara was a graceful young cat with long, silky black fur that flowed behind her like a velvet cape. Her emerald eyes sparkled with kindness, and whenever she smiled, it felt as though the morning sun had found another reason to rise. The royal artists always painted her in soft lavender gowns decorated with silver stars, matching the peaceful colors of Willowmere itself. Every servant adored her. Every child in the kingdom waved whenever she visited. Everyone, except the royal family she lived with. King Rowan rarely looked up from kingdom business. Queen Celestine insisted appearances mattered more than feelings. And Prince Caspian, he had mastered making Elara feel invisible. "Father," Caspian would often say during council meetings, "why waste resources teaching Elara diplomacy? She'll never rule." The king usually nodded. "You're right." Those two simple words hurt every single time. Elara never argued. Instead, she listened. She watched. She learned. While everyone believed she spent afternoons painting flowers, she quietly studied economics from elderly merchants. When others attended lavish banquets, she wandered through village markets, learning why harvests succeeded and why others failed. The blacksmith taught her patience. The librarian taught her history. The gardeners taught her timing. Every ordinary cat became one of her greatest teachers. No one noticed, least of all her family. One spring morning, Willowmere prepared for its annual festival of crowns. Every noble family gathered beneath floating lanterns while musicians filled the palace gardens with cheerful melodies. King Rowan stood proudly beside Caspian. "My son," he announced, "the future ruler of Willowmere." Thunderous applause followed. Elara smiled politely, even though no one had introduced her. Not once. Later that evening, she wandered toward the quiet greenhouse behind the palace. Old Master Bramble, the palace gardener, looked up from trimming pastel roses. "You don't seem upset." Elara smiled. "I used to be." "What changed?" She looked around the greenhouse. "Flowers don't compete to bloom first." The elderly gardener chuckled. "They bloom when they're ready." He handed her a tiny seed. "This one takes years before anyone notices it's growing." Elara carefully placed it into her pocket. "I think I understand." Months passed. The kingdom prospered on the surface. Behind palace walls, problems quietly multiplied. Trade routes slowed. Food prices rose. Merchants began choosing neighboring kingdoms instead of Willowmere. Every council meeting ended the same way. Raise taxes. Spend more. Borrow from the royal treasury. Prince Caspian always sounded confident. Unfortunately, confidence wasn't the same as wisdom. One rainy afternoon, Elara visited the market disguised beneath a simple cream-colored cloak. She enjoyed walking unnoticed. A baker sighed while closing early. "We can't afford flour anymore." Across the street, a toy maker packed away unsold wooden birds. No visitors this season. A fisher cat quietly counted empty baskets. No ships. The kingdom wasn't thriving. It was pretending to. That evening, Elara filled notebook after notebook. Trade. Harvests. River transport. Forest resources. Merchant taxes. She wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She simply wanted answers. Years passed. At 21, Elara had filled an entire library shelf with journals. No one knew they existed, except one cat, Professor Alder, an elderly owl who taught economics at Willowmere Academy. One evening he quietly closed her notebook. "You surpass me." Elara laughed. "I've only been asking questions." "Exactly." He smiled warmly. The smartest leaders ask more questions than they answer. Meanwhile, Prince Caspian celebrated another ambitious announcement. He planned to build the largest crystal palace in the continent. It will attract tourists. It will inspire greatness. It will show our wealth. Everyone applauded, except the royal accountant. He quietly whispered, "We can't afford it." No one listened. Construction began immediately. Thousands of workers, imported crystal, golden decorations, marble roads. The palace sparkled beautifully. It also emptied nearly half the royal treasury. Master Bramble found Elara sitting beneath her favorite cherry blossom tree. "You've been unusually quiet." She watched petals drift into the breeze. "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For everyone else to finish talking." Another year passed. The Crystal Palace opened. Visitors came. For 1 week. Then they stopped. Maintenance costs exploded. Trade continued falling. Taxes climbed higher. Villages struggled. Yet every royal newspaper praised Prince Caspian's historic achievement. The truth quietly disappeared beneath polished headlines. One afternoon, Professor Alder arrived unexpectedly. "I have a proposal." Elara looked curious. "I'm listening." "There is an international gathering. The Summit of 7 Kingdoms. The greatest economists, inventors, and leaders attend every decade." She smiled politely. I doubt father would send me. I didn't ask him. Professor Alder placed an invitation on the table. I nominated you. Silence. You what? The committee accepted. They read your research. They don't know you're a princess. They simply know you're brilliant. For the first time in years, Elara didn't know what to say. King Rowan refused almost instantly. Absolutely not. You belong here. Caspian will represent Willowmere. Professor Alder remained calm. The invitation is addressed specifically to Lady Elara. The committee requested her. Queen Celestine frowned. Why? Professor Alder smiled. Because talent has an interesting habit. It introduces itself. Reluctantly. The king agreed. Very well. But don't embarrass us. Elara simply bowed. I'll do my best. The summit took place inside the floating city of Luminera. Pastel airships drifted peacefully overhead while waterfalls poured between islands suspended in the clouds. Delegates arrived from every corner of the world. Inventors, artists, scientists, farmers, explorers. No crowns mattered there. Only ideas. The first challenge surprised everyone. Rather than speeches, each participant received the same question. A kingdom has enough food for one winter, but poor transportation means half the villages won't receive it in time. What do you fix first? Most answered immediately. Grow more food. Build bigger farms. Hire more workers. When Elara's turn came, she quietly asked, May I see a map? The judges exchanged curious glances. They handed her one. She studied it carefully, then smiled. The food isn't the problem. Everyone stared. The bridges are. She explained calmly. 3 damaged bridges delayed every shipment. Repairing them would cost less than expanding farms. Food would arrive faster. Waste would disappear. Prices would fall naturally. The room became completely silent. Then, one judge slowly began clapping. Soon, the entire hall stood. For the first time in her life, no one applauded because she was royalty. They applauded because she was right. Back in Willowmere, Prince Caspian laughed after hearing the news. A lucky guess. King Rowan agreed. Beginner's fortune. Neither of them noticed another letter arriving from Luminera. This one wasn't merely an invitation. It was an offer. One that would change everything. The invitation rested on Elara's desk long after the palace had gone to sleep. Its wax seal shimmered softly beneath the moonlight, not because it was magical, but because it represented something she had never truly possessed. A choice. The following morning, Professor Alder returned, carrying another envelope. This arrived after the summit. Elara carefully opened it. Inside was a single parchment. To Lady Elara, the Council of 7 Kingdoms invites you to become our youngest strategic advisor. Your research has already influenced several member kingdoms, and we believe your ideas deserve a larger stage. The position is yours should you choose to accept. Her heart skipped. She read it again, then a third time. I've never even left Willowmere before. Professor Alder smiled. Sometimes the world notices someone before they notice themselves. News traveled surprisingly fast. Unfortunately, so did gossip. By lunchtime, Prince Caspian was already laughing in the palace corridors. A strategic advisor? He folded his arms. So they couldn't find anyone older? Several nobles chuckled. Another added, perhaps they wanted someone who enjoys reading dusty books. The hallway filled with quiet laughter. Elara simply smiled. I do enjoy books. She walked away before anyone could say another word. Master Bramble happened to witness everything. Later that afternoon, he found her tending flowers in the greenhouse. You never defend yourself. Elara gently watered a row of lavender blossoms. I don't need to. They're mocking you. They're guessing. She smiled softly. I already know who I am. Several weeks later, Elara boarded her first skyship. Pastel clouds drifted beneath the floating vessel while tiny birds danced beside its crystal sails. Standing at the railing, she watched Willowmere slowly disappear into the distance. She wasn't running away. She was finally walking toward something. The council headquarters was unlike any castle she'd ever seen. There were no grand thrones. No jeweled crowns. No portraits celebrating old victories. Only enormous libraries, workshops, gardens, maps, ideas. Cats from every kingdom worked side by side. Some wore elegant robes. Others wore simple aprons covered in flour, paint, or engine grease. Titles meant very little here. Contributions meant everything. On her first morning, a cheerful orange tabby hurried over. You must be Elara. He nearly dropped an armful of scrolls. I'm Finn. I organize well. He looked at the pile. I try to organize things. Elara laughed. I can help. Together they gathered hundreds of scattered papers. Finn blinked. You know, most important visitors don't help. I'm not most visitors. Within days, the council discovered something unusual. Whenever different experts argued, Elara quietly listened. She asked questions nobody else considered. What if neither plan is wrong? What problem are we actually solving? Have we asked the farmers? Slowly, meetings that usually lasted hours ended in minutes. Meanwhile, back in Willowmere, things were becoming difficult. Very difficult. The Crystal Palace consumed enormous amounts of money simply to maintain. The fountain stopped working. The imported crystal cracked during winter. Repairs doubled, then tripled. Merchants quietly chose neighboring kingdoms where taxes were lower. One by one, trade caravans stopped arriving. King Rowan gathered another emergency council. We need more revenue. Prince Caspian nodded confidently. Raise market taxes. The royal accountant cleared his throat. Your Majesty, if we raise them again, more merchants will leave. Caspian frowned. They won't. They need us. The accountant lowered his eyes. They already have. Far away, Elara received another assignment. A neighboring kingdom called Meadowhollow had a problem. Its rivers flooded every spring. Entire villages lost their harvests. The council expected complicated engineering. Instead, Elara asked to visit the villages herself. She spent 3 days speaking with farmers, fisher cats, mill workers, children. She filled another notebook. On the 4th morning, she smiled. I think I know why. Everyone expected a massive construction project. Instead, she suggested planting thousands of willow trees upstream. Their roots would stabilize the riverbanks naturally. The solution cost a fraction of the original proposal. 1 year later, flood damage dropped dramatically. The villages celebrated, not because someone had performed magic, but because someone had finally listened. Word spread. The quiet princess from Willowmere solved problems without making anyone feel small. Soon, kingdom after kingdom requested her help. She politely accepted each invitation, never seeking attention, never asking for recognition. One evening, Finn walked beside her through the council gardens. You know, you've become famous. Elara nearly laughed. I still buy my own tea. Exactly. Finn grinned. That's why everyone likes you. Back in Willowmere, the opposite was happening. Nobles quietly argued during every meeting. Workers protested rising prices. Even palace servants whispered among themselves. Something had to change. Yet no one dared challenge Prince Caspian openly. One rainy afternoon, a messenger arrived carrying unexpected news. He bowed deeply before King Rowan. Your Majesty, the Council of 7 Kingdoms requests your presence. The king's expression brightened. Excellent. They finally recognized my leadership. The messenger hesitated. Actually, the invitation is addressed to Princess Elara. Silence. Prince Caspian looked confused. What for? The messenger unfolded another letter. The council wishes to honor Lady Elara for her contributions to 6 kingdoms. Queen Celestine blinked. 6. The messenger nodded. She has become one of their highest-rated advisors. That evening, King Rowan paced his study. I don't understand. Professor Alder happened to be visiting. He smiled knowingly. You measured success by applause. She measured success by helping people. Far away, Elara stood inside the council's grand hall. Representatives from every kingdom filled the room. The Grand Chancellor stepped forward. Lady Elara, your work has improved harvests, reopened trade routes, prevented famine, and united kingdoms that once refused to cooperate. He smiled warmly. We would like to offer you a permanent position. The room erupted into applause. Elara looked almost embarrassed. I only ask questions. The Chancellor chuckled. And that's exactly why we're asking you to stay. As the applause slowly settled, a royal courier burst through the enormous doors. Breathing heavily, he bowed. Princess Elara, there has been another financial emergency in Willowmere. The room became quiet. The courier swallowed. The kingdom requests your immediate assistance. Elara closed her notebook. For a long moment, she simply stared toward the distant mountains beyond the windows. The home that had never truly wanted her was finally asking for help. She took a slow breath, then smiled gently. I'll go. Clapperboard interruption, around the 14-minute mark. Narrator. Quick pause before we find out whether Elara walks back into the palace that forgot her. If you've made it this far, I have a tiny favor to ask. Go ahead and tap that subscribe button and follow cats&ai. Not because a mysterious wizard told you to, although if one does appear in your living room, please ask if they do house calls. Seriously though, every subscription tells the creator, yes, please make more stories like this. And since you're clearly someone with excellent taste, you stayed through 14 whole minutes with us, you might secretly be part of the Royal Council already. Now, let's head back to Willowmere. Something tells me this homecoming won't be as peaceful as everyone expects. The journey home felt different. When Elara had left Willowmere, she had been the princess few people noticed. Now, every village the royal carriage passed through seemed to know her name. Children waved excitedly. Farmers tipped their hats. Shopkeepers smiled as they placed fresh flowers along the roadside. None of it had been organized. It was simply gratitude. Elara waved back to every single one of them. As the palace came into view, she noticed something she had never seen before. The once pristine gardens looked neglected. Several fountains had stopped flowing. The marble steps were cracked. Even the royal banners had faded beneath months of neglect. The kingdom wasn't just struggling financially. It had begun losing its spirit. Inside the palace, King Rowan stood waiting in the throne room. For the first time in years, he looked tired. Not angry. Not proud. Just tired. Elara. She bowed respectfully. Your Majesty. There was an awkward silence. He almost called her daughter. Almost. Instead, he cleared his throat. We need your advice. Prince Caspian folded his arms. We don't need to make a big deal out of this. Elara smiled politely. I'm listening. King Rowan spread several maps across the council table. Our treasury is nearly empty. Trade has fallen. The surrounding kingdoms have begun signing agreements with each other instead of us. Our merchants are leaving. Our citizens are unhappy. He looked directly at her. What would you do? Every noble leaned forward. Surely she would embarrass Caspian. Surely she would prove she had been right all along. Instead, Elara asked the same question she always asked. May I visit the villages first? Prince Caspian frowned. Why? We already know the problem. Elara looked at him kindly. No. We know the symptoms. We haven't found the cause. For the next 2 weeks, she traveled without royal escorts. Only a small satchel, a notebook, and comfortable walking boots. She visited fishermen, millers, teachers, blacksmiths, bakers. She even spent an afternoon helping children repair a broken playground. Not because it solved the kingdom's problems, but because she genuinely enjoyed helping. One evening, Master Bramble found her sitting beside the greenhouse. You filled another notebook. Elara laughed. I'm almost out of pages. The elderly gardener smiled knowingly. What have you discovered? She looked toward the distant mountains. The kingdom doesn't have a money problem. It has a trust problem. Back at the palace, she requested another council meeting. The nobles arrived expecting complicated financial strategies. Instead, Elara placed 3 simple jars on the table. One contained seeds, one contained honey, one contained river stones. Prince Caspian looked confused. What exactly is this supposed to prove? She smiled. Everything. She lifted the jar of seeds. A farmer plants these because he trusts tomorrow. Then the honey. Bees work together because each one trusts the hive. Finally, the river stones. A bridge stands because every stone supports another. She looked around the room. A kingdom works exactly the same way. Silence filled the chamber. You raised taxes before helping merchants. You built monuments before repairing roads. You announced victories before solving problems. She wasn't angry. She wasn't mocking anyone. She was simply telling the truth. Our people stopped believing their voices mattered. The royal accountant slowly nodded. She's right. Several ministers exchanged nervous glances. One elderly advisor quietly admitted, I warned us about this years ago. Prince Caspian stood. So your solution is? Feelings. Elara chuckled softly. My solution is listening. She unrolled a new map. We repair trade roads. We lower merchant taxes for 1 year. We invest in local workshops. We restore our river ports. And every month, the council meets in a different village. King Rowan blinked. In a village. So everyone can speak. The room fell silent once again. Not because the plan was complicated. Because it wasn't. The king approved it. Slowly at first. Then completely. Months passed. Roads reopened. Markets grew lively once again. Artists returned. Musicians filled the town squares. Travelers once again crossed Willowmere's beautiful bridges. The kingdom began smiling again. One afternoon, Finn arrived from the council carrying exciting news. You won't believe this. Elara laughed. I probably won't. The 7 kingdoms voted. They've chosen Willowmere to host the next grand summit. King Rowan looked stunned. Us. Finn nodded enthusiastically. They specifically requested Princess Elara oversee the event. Preparations began immediately. This time, Elara insisted on something different. No expensive statues. No golden arches. No giant crystal fountains. The decorators looked confused. What would you like instead? She smiled. Flowers. Music. Local artists. Children's inventions. Our people should be the ones everyone remembers. The summit became the largest celebration Willowmere had ever hosted. Visitors wandered through colorful pastel gardens. Young inventors proudly demonstrated clever machines. Artists painted magical landscapes. Village bakers shared family recipes. Musicians filled every street with joyful melodies. Nobody talked about royal wealth. Everyone talked about community. On the final evening, the Grand Chancellor stood before thousands of guests. There is one final honor. The crowd became quiet. 4 years, Princess Elara believed leadership meant earning love. He smiled warmly. But she taught us something far greater. A true leader does not ask, how many will follow me? A true leader asks, how many can I help? Thunderous applause echoed through the kingdom. King Rowan slowly walked onto the stage. For the first time, there was no crown upon his head, only humility. He faced Elara. I spent years believing leadership came from authority. His voice trembled slightly. I was wrong. He looked at the cheering crowd. I forgot that kingdoms aren't built by castles. They're built by kindness. He turned back toward her. I cannot change the past. But I hope you'll forgive an old father who finally learned how to listen." The entire square became silent. Elara looked into his eyes. She remembered every lonely birthday, every forgotten achievement, every moment she wished he had simply noticed her. She also remembered something Master Bramble once told her. Flowers don't bloom because yesterday was perfect. They bloom because today is possible. She smiled gently. "I forgive you," not because everything had been forgotten, but because carrying bitterness would never help the kingdom grow. Prince Caspian stepped forward next. For once, he had no clever remark, no excuse, no boast. "I spent years trying to be admired." He laughed awkwardly. "It turns out, people actually prefer kindness." Even Elara couldn't help smiling. The siblings began rebuilding their relationship slowly. Not perfectly, not overnight, but honestly. Sometimes, that's the strongest kind of beginning. Years later, travelers from distant kingdoms would ask, "Who built the golden age of Willowmere?" Some answered, "The princess." Others replied, "The council." Many simply smiled. It was everyone. Because Elara had never built an empire. She had built something far more lasting. A kingdom where every voice mattered. As the sun set behind the pastel mountains, Elara stood beside Master Bramble in the greenhouse where it had all begun. The tiny seed he had given her years ago had become a magnificent flowering tree. Its branches stretched toward the sky, covered in glowing blossoms. "You were right," she whispered. He smiled. "No, you were patient. And patience has a wonderful habit of becoming something beautiful." The petals drifted into the evening breeze, floating across Willowmere like tiny stars. And for the first time, Princess Elara no longer wondered whether she belonged. She was home. Asterisk. If Elara's journey made you smile, inspired you, or reminded you that quiet kindness can change the world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Cats and AI. Every new subscriber helps bring more magical cat adventures to life. And who knows, the next unforgettable story might begin with a single click from you. Until next time, keep your heart kind, your curiosity alive, and we'll see you in the next Cats and AI adventure.